The moment Caitlin Clark stepped onto the tee box at Pelican Golf Club, the entire atmosphere tilted on its axis. It didn't feel like a quiet morning in Florida. It felt like the final seconds of a championship game, the kind where tens of thousands hold their breath because they know the last shot is coming from the one player who always delivers. Except this time, there was no arena, no hardwood, no roaring buzzer overhead. Just a fairway shimmering in the early heat and a crowd that showed up like they were lining the tunnel on opening night. People weren't just watching her, they were orbiting her. Fans pressed shoulder to shoulder along the ropes, filling every patch of grass like they were claiming territory. Some had golf gear, but most wore Indiana Fever jerseys that had absolutely nothing to do with the event they were attending. It didn't matter. They weren't here for golf. They were here for her. Phones were already held high before she'd even taken her first practice swing. Conversations died mid-sentence when she appeared on the walkway, and the sudden wave of energy rippled so sharply through the crowd that even the broadcasters stopped what they were doing just to acknowledge it. And the wildest part? This reaction didn't come after she drained a deep three or threaded a pass between two defenders. It came before she touched a club. Before the broadcast officially cut to her. Before the cameras even had the chance to zoom in. The roar that broke out when her name echoed from the loudspeaker sounded like the eruption after hitting a game winner. Except this time, nothing had happened yet. She was just existing in the space, and somehow, that was enough to flip the environment upside down. People weren't whispering. They were buzzing like something historic was about to happen, even if they couldn't explain why. Kids wearing oversized Fever shirts sat on parents' shoulders. Grown adults leaned across the ropes just to get a closer look. Groups who had never watched a minute of golf were suddenly analyzing her warm-up routine like they were scouting film. And tucked underneath all that excitement was something else. Something heavier, something unspoken. It was the realization that this wasn't normal. This wasn't just another celebrity pro-am appearance. This was a moment that revealed a fracture in the world of women's sports that had been hiding in plain sight. Because while the golf world welcomed her like a headliner, praising her crossover appeal and celebrating the chaos she brought with her, another world, the one she actually competes in, hasn't always known what to do with someone whose influence spills way beyond the sidelines. You could feel that contrast hang in the air, silent but undeniable. The cheers at Pelican weren't just for a star athlete. They were for someone whose presence has started reshaping the conversation around an entire league, an entire fan base, an entire era of women's sports. Standing there on that tee box, Caitlin didn't have to say anything. She didn't need an introduction. Her reputation walked out ahead of her, her presence electrified the fairway around her, and the entire event shifted to match her gravity. Everyone watching understood they were witnessing something bigger than a simple round of golf, whether they could articulate it yet or not. When her club finally lifted for that first swing, it wasn't just the beginning of a shot. It was the beginning of a story that would stretch far beyond that fairway, far beyond that day, and deep into the conversations about power, influence, respect, and the changing landscape of women's sports. Before Caitlin Clark ever stepped onto that fairway, before golf commentators uttered her name with the same excitement usually saved for major champions, she had already reshaped the landscape of an entirely different sport. Her rise wasn't gradual. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't the kind of slow burn most athletes experience as they climb toward stardom. Caitlin's ascent looked more like an explosion. Loud, disruptive, and impossible to ignore. She entered the national spotlight at Iowa as a scorer, but she became a phenomenon because of everything else. The logo range threes, the court vision that made crowds gasp, the swagger, the intensity, the ability to turn a regular season game into must-see entertainment. She didn't just lead a team. She captivated a movement. The arenas filled. The broadcasts spiked. The conversations online shifted from curiosity to obsession. Suddenly, people who couldn't name 3 women's college players were debating her assist-to-turnover ratio like they'd been watching for years. By the time she reached her senior season, the Clark effect wasn't a theory. It was math. Ticket prices skyrocketed. Scalpers sold seats for more than some NBA games. Schools broke attendance records simply because she was in the building. Every game felt like an event, every arena felt too small, and every broadcast found an audience that had never tuned into women's basketball before. She wasn't just pushing the sport forward, she was dragging it into a new era. And when the draft rolled around, Everyone already knew how this story would go. The Indiana Fever didn't select her. They claimed her, the way a franchise claims a lifeline. Overnight, the Fever transformed from a small market team to the epicenter of a national conversation. Merchandise sold out before the season tipped off. The schedule changed to give her more televised games. Opposing arenas built entire marketing strategies around her arrival. The craziest part? She handled it all like it was normal. Then came the rookie season, electric, chaotic, historic. She was breaking records almost weekly. Fastest to hit certain scoring marks, youngest to hit assist milestones, first rookie to lead the league in jersey sales. Analysts had to update their graphics in real time because her numbers refused to stay still. Even when the Fever struggled early, the audience didn't shrink. If anything, the growing pains made her rise feel even more dramatic, like fans were watching a star learn to carry a franchise in real time. But underneath the highlights and viral clips was the reality nobody wanted to say too loudly. She was doing all of this while dealing with injuries that drained her strength, limited her range, and weighed on her confidence. She wasn't at full power. And still, the country showed up for her. That's why her appearance at Pelican meant something deeper than a fun golf cameo. Fans weren't just excited because she was playing another sport. They were excited because they knew what she'd accomplished without being fully healthy. They knew how much she'd carried on her back. They knew how much potential was still waiting in the tank. When she walked onto that tee box, they weren't just seeing Caitlin Clark the golfer. They were seeing Caitlin Clark the phenomenon, someone who had already changed one sport and was now stepping into another space as if the transformation followed her wherever she went. Her rise isn't just a chapter in her career. It's the foundation of everything that happened at Pelican. The packed fairways, the cameras, the crowd energy, the feeling that something monumental was happening. None of it makes sense without understanding the wave she's been riding for years. A wave she created. A wave she controls. A wave that's forcing every league, every executive, and every sport to rethink what star power actually looks like in this era. Long before the cameras followed her down the fairway, long before her presence made a golf broadcast spike in real time, Caitlin Clark already had a connection to the sport that most people didn't know existed. To the casual observer, her showing up at Pelican looked like a fun off-season crossover. A basketball star dipping a toe into another arena just to entertain the fans. But anyone who's been paying attention knows that golf isn't a side hobby for her. It's part of her DNA, woven quietly into her life long before she was dropping 40 points in front of sold-out crowds. Her love for the game goes all the way back to childhood. Before she was draining logo threes, before she was rewriting college basketball records, she was begging her dad to take her to the golf course. For her, golf wasn't a break from basketball. It was a release, the kind of challenge that sharpened her mind as much as her competitive edge. She didn't talk about it often during her college career, partly because basketball demanded everything she had, and partly because she was the kind of athlete who kept certain passions close to the chest. But whenever she did mention it, you could hear the same spark in her voice that she had when she talked about big games. That's what made her transition into the Pro-Am circuit feel so natural. This wasn't a random off-season experiment. It was her stepping into a space she's always been comfortable in. And that comfort showed the second she picked up a club at Pelican. Her grip, her stance, her focus, it all looked like someone who had spent real time studying the craft. Not just playing for fun, but genuinely improving. During the off-season, she didn't just hit a few range balls between workouts. She went all in, training with golf pros, tightening her mechanics, refining her tempo, and learning how to generate power without forcing the motion. That intention became even more obvious in the moments leading up to her first swing. She wasn't treating the course like a celebrity invited for a cameo. She carried herself like an athlete who understood the expectations and wanted to meet them. Every warm-up shot came with that same intensity she uses when preparing for a big game. Her shoulders loosened, her eyes tracked the fairway, and her body language looked eerily similar to the way she locks in before tip-off. But it wasn't just the technique that captured people. It was the fit, the way golf seemed to suit her brand almost too perfectly. The Nike gear, the CC logo embroidered just subtle enough to look polished but bold enough to catch every camera angle. The athlete-on-vacation vibe mixed with a quiet competitiveness. It didn't feel forced. It felt like the natural next step of a star whose influence has already broken through the walls of her primary sport. What really turned heads, though, was how the golf world responded. They recognized her potential instantly, not just as a golfer, but as a cross-sport force. LPGA stars treated her not like a guest, but like a peer. Broadcasters didn't treat her round like a sideshow. They treated it like the main storyline. They knew the eyes were on her, and instead of dodging that attention or pretending it wasn't happening, they leaned into it fully. And fans. They followed her into this world without hesitation. People who didn't know a single thing about golf terminology suddenly learned what tempo meant. Fans who had never tuned in to a golf broadcast suddenly found themselves watching every hole she played. Entire threads online analyzed her swing mechanics with the same passion they normally reserved for her pick-and-roll reads. That kind of crossover isn't normal. It doesn't happen just because someone is famous. It happens because certain athletes possess a gravitational pull that doesn't turn off when they leave their primary arena. Caitlin walking into golf wasn't the result of a marketing plan or a brand collaboration. It was a glimpse into something bigger, a world where her influence naturally expands into spaces that weren't built with her in mind, yet somehow adjust to fit around her anyway. The golf course wasn't just a new setting. It was proof that her impact travels with her, no matter where she goes or what sport she stands inside. And Pelican wasn't even the moment the story peaked. It was just the moment everyone realized the crossover wasn't random. It was intentional, rooted in years of quiet passion, and now ready to explode into something much bigger than a single weekend event. When Caitlin Clark finally stepped onto the first tee at Pelican Golf Club, the crowd didn't just react, they erupted. It was the kind of reaction usually reserved for a championship introduction, not a quiet pro-am event tucked into the Florida morning. But nothing about this moment was quiet. Nothing about it felt casual. And the longer the cameras followed her, the clearer it became that Pelican wasn't simply hosting an athlete. It was hosting a cultural event disguised as a golf outing. Fans packed in rows that looked more like music festival crowds than spectators at a pro-am. People sprinted from hole to hole trying to get a better angle. Security staff kept whispering into radios, trying to adjust on the fly because they weren't prepared for a turnout that looked like a mini major championship. Broadcasters who normally opened with calm commentary suddenly shifted their tone. This wasn't a warm-up segment anymore. It was the headline of the entire broadcast. Then she dropped the update that flipped the day upside down. Her shoulder was healed. Fully healed. No pain. No restrictions. No hesitation. She didn't stage it. She didn't build drama. She didn't puff her chest or tease it like some dramatic reveal. She said it casually, in the middle of conversation, almost like she forgot she was talking to media. But the moment the words left her mouth, the entire gallery reacted like she'd hit a hole-in-one. People shouted, clapped, even grabbed each other's shoulders like they had just witnessed something monumental. And in a way they had. Because that update should have come from her league. It should have come during a press availability. It should have come through team channels, league interviews, or at minimum, a controlled environment where the WNBA could shape the moment. Instead, she delivered it on a golf course. Different sport. Different audience. Different energy. And the symbolism was impossible to ignore. She chose a stage where people actually listen. A place where her words wouldn't be minimized, reframed, or drowned out by the noise that often follows her in basketball spaces. A place where she wasn't undercut by narratives that feel more political than sporty. Here, the reaction was pure. Fans thrilled for her return, broadcasters excited about what it meant, and athletes around her treating it like the beginning of her next chapter. But the real twist wasn't the announcement. It was the way she showed she was back. Her swing looked stronger. Her rotation looked clean. The shoulder that once held her back didn't show even a flicker of hesitation. Fans whispered the same thing over and over as they watched her move. She wasn't moving like this in July. And they were right. This wasn't the version of Caitlin we saw fighting through pain. This was the version ready to make noise again. Slowly, the chatter around the course shifted. People weren't talking about club choice or approach shots anymore. They were talking about the Fever roster, next season's possibilities, how dangerous Indiana becomes with a fully healthy star, and how this update might change the landscape of the league. A golf event had turned into a live preseason analysis show without anyone planning for it. But the thing fans kept pointing out, the thing impossible to ignore, was how the golf world embraced her in a way women's basketball hasn't always known how to handle. LPGA stars welcomed her like a high-profile VIP. Broadcasters showcased her as a central storyline. Organizers paired her with headlining talent, not as a charity invite but as a genuine draw. And viewers? They tuned in for her. Meanwhile, the WNBA has spent the past year walking a tightrope, balancing her impact with an uncomfortable reluctance to fully embrace what she represents. Whether it's tension behind the scenes, political noise online, or league officials unsure how to manage a player who became bigger than the system around her, the contrast is undeniable. Golf rolled out the red carpet. Basketball sometimes rolls out bubble wrap. Pelican didn't just highlight this contrast, it magnified it. It showed what happens when a sport decides to amplify its biggest star instead of downplaying her. It showed what an event looks like when you lean in instead of pulling back. And it revealed, in real time, the difference between a league ready to grow and a league still figuring out how to handle the growth happening right in front of it. Pelican wasn't just a pro-am. It was a mirror. And it showed a reality many people were already whispering about. Caitlin Clark's influence is bigger than a single sport, and whichever league embraces that truth first will benefit the most. What made the day at Pelican unforgettable wasn't just the crowds, the cameras, or the shoulder update. It was the dynamic, the energy Caitlin carried with her everywhere she walked, amplified by the two people flanking her like a moving highlight reel of chemistry. Sophie Cunningham and Lexie didn't show up as props. They didn't show up as silent caddies whose job was to lug clubs and smile politely for the broadcast. They showed up like sisters, teammates, and co-conspirators in one of the most unexpectedly iconic moments of the entire offseason. From the moment the three of them stepped onto the course, you could tell this wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't manufactured. It was genuine connection, the kind of chemistry teams spend years trying to create and often never find. Sophie tossed playful jabs at Caitlin after every warm-up swing. Lexie fired back with jokes that had fans around them cracking up. Caitlin responded with the same deadpan sarcasm she uses courtside. It felt less like a pro-am appearance and more like viewers had accidentally stumbled into a behind-the-scenes documentary the Fever never intended to release. Everywhere they walked, they carried an ease that made the crowd lean in closer, like they were watching a trio that just fit. And that's what made the viral moment hit even harder. Because it came out of nowhere. As they made their way down one of the fairways, a group of fans shouted for Sophie and Lexie to re-sign with Indiana. They yelled it loud, not like a casual suggestion, but like people who knew exactly how important the Fever's chemistry was for next season. And without missing a beat, Sophie spun around, grinned, and unleashed the line that detonated across the internet. "Tell them to pay us." The crowd exploded. Lexie nearly dropped the golf bag from laughing. Caitlin tried her hardest not to break form but couldn't hide the smile. It was comedic, quick, and completely unfiltered, but it wasn't just a joke. It was layered. It held weight. It exposed a truth players rarely say out loud, especially mid-event, especially with cameras rolling, especially in a moment that wasn't supposed to mean anything. But this one did. That sentence carried the frustration fans have been shouting for months. It echoed the tension swirling beneath the surface of the league. It captured the entire conversation about player value, compensation, and the undeniable surge in visibility that athletes like Caitlin, and the teammates standing beside her, have created. It was a joke, sure. But it was also a message. A message everyone instantly understood. Within minutes, clips of the moment flooded social media. Fans replayed it not just because it was funny, but because it felt honest. Authentic. It peeled back the curtain on what athletes actually think but rarely say publicly. This wasn't a polished media answer. It wasn't a safe, corporate-approved line. It was real emotion, delivered in a setting where nobody expected anything important to happen. And maybe that's why it hit so hard. The most revealing part? Nobody looked uncomfortable. Nobody tried to shush Sophie. Nobody tried to pivot the conversation. Nobody acted like the remark crossed some invisible line. Caitlin laughed. Lexie cracked up. The gallery loved it. And the internet turned it into a rallying cry. Because the truth is simple. Players know their worth. Fans know their worth. And the moment that line hit the air, it became impossible to ignore. A golf course, of all places, became the stage for a conversation the WNBA has been tiptoeing around for years. Not during a press conference. Not in a boardroom. Not in a carefully structured interview. But during a sunny walk down the fairway with three athletes who weren't trying to make a statement, yet ended up making one louder than anything scripted. More than anything, the moment proved something bigger. The Fever aren't just building a roster. They're building a culture. A bond. A core that believes in each other and understands what they're capable of, on the court, off the court, and even on a golf course where none of them were supposed to steal the show. Caitlin didn't need to hit a single jumper that day. Sophie didn't need to score a single point. Lexie didn't need to execute a perfect defensive rotation. And yet, together, they generated one of the most powerful, talked-about moments of the entire offseason. Pelican wasn't just about golf. It was about identity, about voice, about players refusing to be silent in a moment designed for simplicity. And the message echoed far beyond the fairway. They know their value, and now everyone else does too. If anyone tried to downplay Caitlin Clark's impact at Pelican, the numbers shut that conversation down immediately. What happened at that event didn't just exceed expectations. It obliterated them. And the wildest part? None of it was supposed to happen. Not at that scale. Not at that intensity. Not with that level of national attention. But the moment she stepped onto the course, the data lines started bending upward like they were being yanked by a magnet. Attendance didn't just improve. It exploded. Crowds normally stroll into pro-am events. They show up casually, find a comfortable spot, sip a drink, and enjoy the sunshine. But at Pelican, fans packed the course like they were fighting for seats at a playoff game. People arrived hours earlier than organizers predicted. The parking lots filled before sunrise. Parents lifted kids onto their shoulders to see over the sea of bodies. Fever jerseys mixed with golf attire in a way nobody had ever witnessed before. It felt like two completely different sports had collided, and somehow, it worked beautifully. But fans weren't just there in person, they were everywhere online too. The moment Caitlin took her first practice swing, clips started circulating across social media faster than the broadcast could keep up. A short video of her walking down the fairway racked up thousands of views within minutes. Another clip, showing her warm-up, hit even bigger numbers. Even casual sports fans, the ones who normally ignore anything outside the major leagues, were suddenly weighing in like they'd been following LPGA events for years. Golf influencers posted about her. WNBA fans posted about her. People who had never watched golf before were suddenly experts on swing mechanics and shoulder rotation. That surge in online engagement wasn't luck. It was proof. Proof that her presence doesn't just bring attention. It drags entire audiences into sports they never cared about until she arrived. Then came the broadcast numbers, the part nobody could argue with. The Golf Channel shifted coverage toward her round because viewership spiked the moment she appeared on screen. Commentators openly admitted it. She was drawing in an entirely different audience, one they weren't used to attracting. Viewers who normally scroll past golf unless it's a major suddenly tuned in like this was a primetime matchup. It wasn't because of the course. It wasn't because of the tournament. It was because of her. Even analysts watching remotely acknowledged how rare this was. Athletes don't typically cross into a different sport and elevate viewership. They don't show up once and rewrite attendance patterns. They don't casually participate in a pro-am and make it the biggest online moment of the entire event. But Caitlin did all of that without even trying to be the center of attention. Fans online compared the numbers to what she does for the WNBA, and the similarities were impossible to ignore. Everywhere she goes, the metrics jump. Everywhere she appears, crowds form. Every moment she steps into becomes a highlight, even if the sport isn't her own. And that's where the contrast stings the most. Golf embraced those numbers. They welcomed the surge, celebrated it, amplified it. They didn't act confused about the attention or unsure whether it was good for the game. They understood instantly. A superstar brings growth. A superstar brings new audiences. A superstar changes everything. The WNBA. Fans have spent months pointing out how hesitant the league sometimes seems. How nervous. How oddly cautious about acknowledging the reality the numbers make unavoidable. When an athlete breaks attendance records, drives unprecedented ratings, and shifts entire demographics toward a sport, the only logical reaction is to embrace it fully. Celebrate it. Build around it. But at Pelican, golf did something the basketball world hasn't always done. They let Caitlin shine without hesitation. And the results spoke for themselves. Attendance surged. Viewership spiked. Online engagement exploded. Every metric that matters in modern sports screamed the same thing. Give her the spotlight, and the sport grows. Give her room to breathe, and she creates momentum. Give her freedom to be herself, and entire audiences follow. Pelican wasn't just a fun off-season cameo. It was a case study. A live experiment that proved what fans already knew. Caitlin Clark doesn't boost sports, she transforms them. And whichever leagues fully embrace that reality will ride a wave of growth they've never seen before. The moment Caitlin Clark confirmed she was fully healthy, everything surrounding next season shifted like someone flipped a switch. It wasn't just a personal milestone. It wasn't just a medical update. It was a ripple, a shockwave that moved through fans, analysts, and even rival teams who instantly understood what a healed Caitlin meant for the entire landscape of women's basketball. Because here's the truth people sometimes forget. Indiana made the postseason without her at full strength. They fought through injuries, double teams, physical defenses, and pressure that crushed other rookies long before they found their footing. And still, the Fever clawed their way into the playoffs. Not because everything was perfect, but because even a limited Caitlin Clark changes the geometry of a basketball court. Now, her range is back. Her strength is back. Her confidence is reloaded. The version of Caitlin we saw at Pelican wasn't someone recovering. It was someone returning. Someone recharged. Someone whose movements, whether it was a golf swing or the way she joked with teammates, showed a level of ease we didn't see during the grind of last season. That's why analysts started whispering about the 2026 Fever the moment her announcement hit the air. With her fully healthy, Indiana doesn't just look competitive. They look dangerous. A team with chemistry, young talent, and a star capable of taking over any game at any moment suddenly becomes a contender, not a hopeful project. And every fan who watched her walk those fairways felt it. The comeback isn't just about one player. It's about the momentum she drags behind her like a tidal wave. But her shoulder update was only one piece of a much bigger picture. A picture that stretches far beyond the basketball court. Pelican proved something deeper. Caitlin isn't just a player. She's a cultural presence, the kind of figure who pulls multiple sports into the same conversation without even trying. She collaborates with athletes, crosses into new environments, blends fan bases, and creates moments that feel bigger than the sport itself. That's what most leagues crave, authentic, multi-sport resonance. And she has it naturally. When she walked the fairway with Sophie Cunningham and Lexie, it wasn't just a fun bonding moment. It was a glimpse into what a unified Fever core could become. Their chemistry didn't look staged. It looked lived in, built through shared seasons, shared struggles, shared ambition. That kind of connection doesn't disappear. It follows players onto courts, into locker rooms, across the tough stretches of a season where chemistry matters just as much as talent. If that core stays intact, and if Caitlin returns with the form she displayed in every effortless motion that day, Indiana becomes a team with something most franchises spend years trying to build. Momentum. Identity. Unity. A superstar capable of elevating everything around her. That's why fans weren't just celebrating her health. They were talking about legacy. Not legacy in the sense of rings or trophies, though those conversations have already started swirling. Legacy in the sense of influence. Reach. Cultural shift. The kind of impact that doesn't stay inside one league, one sport, or one city. And this is where the tension becomes impossible to ignore. Pelican showed one sport embracing her with open arms. Letting her shine, letting her expand, letting her bring the storm of attention she naturally commands. Meanwhile, her own league has often walked on eggshells, unsure of how to manage a star whose popularity hasn't just grown. It's exploded beyond anything they've ever had. But here's the reality every league will eventually have to face. You don't control a star like Caitlin Clark. You ride the wave with her, or you get swept aside while another sport takes the opportunity you hesitated on. Because she's already proving that her influence doesn't need permission. She proved it at Iowa. She proved it as a rookie. She proved it at Pelican, where a simple golf swing turned into a national moment. And now, with her fully healed, fully confident, and fully aware of the spotlight she carries, her next chapter is shaping up to be the biggest one yet. Pelican wasn't just a fun day off. It was a preview. A trailer for the version of Caitlin Clark the world is about to see again. A version ready to push boundaries, shatter expectations, and force every conversation about women's sports to evolve or get left behind. The question now isn't whether she'll change the future. It's how far that change will reach, and whether the institutions around her will be ready when it arrives. From the first step she took onto that tee box to the final putt of the afternoon, everything about Caitlin Clark's appearance at Pelican felt like a preview of a much larger story unfolding in real time. What was supposed to be a simple pro-am turned into a lens, a sharp, unforgiving lens, that revealed exactly how different the world looks when an athlete refuses to shrink herself to fit into anyone's expectations. Fans flooded the course before she even arrived. Broadcasters shifted their entire focus the moment she picked up a club. The energy on the fairway didn't match what the event usually draws. It matched a championship stage. And when Caitlin casually announced her shoulder was fully healed, the entire storyline around next season transformed instantly. Analysts moved. Fans buzzed. Opposing teams took notice. This wasn't just a health update. It was a warning shot. The kind that tells a league its next chapter is about to get a lot louder. But what made Pelican more than just a moment was the contrast it exposed. Golf saw her impact and welcomed it with open arms. They didn't hesitate. They didn't downplay her presence. They didn't treat her like a distraction from the sport. They treated her like the main event, because she was. Meanwhile, her home league has tiptoed around the spotlight she brings, unsure how to hold a star whose influence stretches far beyond the lines of the court. Pelican answered that doubt. It showed what happens when a sport embraces a generational athlete instead of containing her. It showed what happens when fans are given permission to celebrate someone without restriction. It showed what happens when the environment matches the moment. And then there were Sophie Cunningham and Lexie, two teammates whose presence turned the event into something even bigger. Their jokes, their chemistry, and the now iconic "tell them to pay us" moment didn't just make people laugh. They exposed the truth everyone already knew. Players understand their value, and they're tired of watching outdated systems pretend not to see it. That one sentence echoed across the internet because it wasn't scripted. It was honest. It was raw. It was everything fans have been trying to articulate for months. By the time the sun started slipping toward the horizon, the energy at Pelican had shifted. The crowd began drifting toward the exits, but the moment lingered, the sense that this day meant something. That this crossover between sports didn't happen by accident. That Caitlin Clark isn't just a player to watch. She's a force reshaping the way women's sports are viewed, marketed, and celebrated. She doesn't just show up. She alters the atmosphere. She shifts the narrative. She pulls entire audiences into places they've never looked before. And the leagues that recognize that will grow with her. The ones that hesitate will get left behind while another sport steps in and seizes the moment. Pelican wasn't about golf. It wasn't about a swing. It wasn't even about an injury update. It was about momentum, and the realization that it's only getting stronger. Because if this is the reaction she creates playing golf for one afternoon, imagine what happens when she steps back onto the basketball court at full power. Imagine the storylines, the rivalries, the viewership spikes, the energy. Imagine the way the sport could evolve if her league embraces the wave instead of bracing against it. One thing is certain, the future didn't just get interesting, it started accelerating. Caitlin Clark isn't waiting for permission. She's moving. And everyone else is going to have to catch up. Before you go, if you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, stories that go behind the headlines, expose what's really happening in sports, and explore the moments other channels ignore, make sure you subscribe. We're building this channel from the ground up, and every new subscriber directly helps us bring you more high-quality, research-driven videos. So if you learn something new, if you enjoyed the storytelling, or if you want to stay ahead of the curve on the biggest conversations in sports. Subscribe to the channel, tap the like button to push this video to more viewers, drop a comment with your thoughts. Your engagement helps the algorithm recognize that this content deserves to be seen. This channel is small right now, but with your support, it can grow into one of the strongest voices covering the future of women's sports. Let's build it together.